Arsenal announced the signing of Raheem Sterling, of course, at 1:45 a.m.
Got him on the old deal sheet rule.
Pete didn't even notice.
No, he didn't.
Pete didn't even know it happened.
He didn't know.
Even though he's a closet Arsenal fan.
But I like this signing. A season-long loan from Chelsea. It's been reported that Arsenal are not even paying half of his wages. They're less than that, so they're not paying a loan fee either.
Yeah.
So a good deal.
Chelsea paying someone to play for Arsenal is fine by me.
You like that, don't you? You
Yeah.
dirty little. But it is nice. We mentioned on yesterday's show that Mikel Arteta is reunited with Raheem Sterling.
Yeah, he absolutely loves him, doesn't he? I think it's a good move for Sterling as well, obviously, because the whole situation at Chelsea had become. It was a bit of a shame, really, wasn't it?
The bomb squad.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, and clearly it didn't quite work out there. I don't think anyone's expecting Sterling to be the player of like 4 or 5 years ago when he was sort of really, really flying. But I think he's certainly an option who can contribute, with all due respect to him, probably more than Reece Nelson. I think what Arsenal have needed has been a sort of a Leandro Trossard type profile of player who can operate on the other side and contribute. Now, Sterling, actually, his best position probably is off the left, which is the same as Martinelli and Trossard, but I expect that he is there to sort of deputise for Saka very often, which is what is needed, because he is just overplayed so much.
Oh, yeah. No, I agree with all those points, and I think that from my point of view, obviously being a massive England fan, as we all are, you know what Sterling has done fairly recently, obviously at Chelsea.
I thought you were hoping that he was going to get back in the squad.
He does hope that. Look at him. He does hope that.
Well, on merit. Got a lot of options, England.
Yeah.
Got a lot of options. Lot of options.
Yeah.
But seeing Sterling one side and maybe Saka the other would be quite nice.
Yeah, a little bit of a throwback.
And Arsenal get Harry Kane.
And they start wearing white.
Imagine Mikel Arteta started the press conference to announce that. Look, I know what you're thinking, but hear me out. Hear me out.
Got England to a final.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I know I am enjoying this. I think Sterling, again, one can think he's sort of 32, 33, and even if he was, I think he would still have something to offer. But the idea of, like, he's not even a bit part player at Chelsea. The idea he won't play football, I think, is criminal for a player of his talent. So he had to get out of there. And Chelsea know that. There's no point in having a guy who's on a huge wage doing absolutely nothing. It's not good for the players, not very. So when Sterling is I mean, Edu and Arteta themselves said of Sterling, we weren't in the market for him.
Yeah.
But when it becomes an option, you think, well, actually, and obviously the links that Arteta and Sterling have from their time at Man City, it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, even a week before this, I wouldn't have been particularly keen on Sterling. But you don't get a deal like this other than on deadline day, right? When there's someone who needs a move and you essentially get him for no loan fee and a very reasonable contribution to his wages. Obviously, earlier in the window, you're not getting that. Clearly, the targets they wanted permanently just weren't available or would have been too pricey. So, I mean, I'm happy with it in the circumstances.
Indeed. Do you feel, Luke, that Chelsea almost, because of making it very clear that some of these players aren't going to play and they're good players, they almost turned it a little bit into a Black Friday?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. I did like seeing the CCTV footage of Mikel Arteta and Edu trying to smash into a Best Buy at 1 minute past midnight.
Yeah.
Saying, the deadline's open, we've got to do it.
Come on.
I think it's interesting that it's been met with a bit of a mixed reaction from some Arsenal fans. Maybe we'll come on to that in a minute. But in terms of the move itself, it's an amazing gamble by Chelsea. This is a guy who's been there a couple of seasons. He did feature quite a lot last season, played a lot more than maybe some people think. Maybe didn't start as many games as he wanted to, but he still played a fair amount. Incredibly experienced player. He's not had his best season. Well, he's not had a great season by his own standards for a number of years now, but not a massive number of years.
The numbers aren't bad, actually, when you look at contributions to minutes. And
then you think about the fact that Enzo Maresca has clearly thought, he has to make a stand on the fact the amount of players he's got and the way he wants to take the club forward and the way he wants them to play. He's had to decide that Sterling's not going to feature. Now, when he does that to a player of such experience, profile, personality, reputation, he has to go all in. Yeah. He can't just say, well, I'm not going to answer questions on Raheem Sterling because he's going to get asked them every week. Yeah. Raheem Sterling's going to do what he did and force things and all that kind of stuff. So he had to do it. So I respect and I understand why Maresca came out so strongly against Sterling. I don't think it was personal. I just think it was like, look, I've got to own this narrative. I'm the manager. There's a lot going on. Chelsea's a complete bin fire, right? Chelsea fans may not like hearing that, and they may not agree even, and that's fair enough. But my view is, it's a bin fire. It's impossible to control that amount of players and that amount of personnel and be successful long term. There has to be a plan there that hasn't really revealed itself to us as yet. As a result, Sterling's better off out of there for all those reasons. Now
at his age, for sure.
And now he goes to Arsenal. Well, look, he's stepping up to play in the Champions League. He won't be playing in the Conference League. I mean, there's a chance that he could have been demeaned for a player of his experience, and he might not have fancied it.
He's going to play a better team.
Now he's going to play in the Champions League, playing for a better team. Right. Also, Arsenal are in a situation where I think they're not right at the very start of their cycle or their start of their move, what moves they're going to make with Arteta, but they're kind of nearer the beginning than the end, I would say. And they've got players in there who will massively benefit from having a player of his experience in that squad for Champions League game, Premier League, Champions League, Premier League, that kind of almost like treadmill of really high quality games all the time. I think it's an amazing move for Arsenal. I don't understand some of the opposition to it. A few Arsenal fans I know weren't very happy about it because they don't think Sterling's still there. They think he's a bit cooked. It remains to be seen.
But they've not signed him to start games.
But what an amazing thing to have in your locker. Because if you look at Man City's bench, it's just full of quality.
I agree with you.
And Arsenal drops off a lot more than Man City does. So having Sterling in there's a great thing.
I've not seen much opposition to it, but like you, I've deleted Twitter off my phone. So that's what you see a lot of that stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, you look more relaxed and refreshed.
I genuinely feel it.
Yeah. But also as well, you mentioned there, look, proven Premier League winner, and that kind of experience. You never know. Just having
he's won so much,
yeah,
absolutely. And his attitude, I think, is you hear a lot of negative stuff about Raheem Sterling, and it all tends to be complete nonsense made up by the tabloids. I think who he actually is a very experienced, great pro who will fit into that dressing room really well.
I mean, he played for years under Guardiola and won stuff.
Yeah. And Arteta knows him from that time, as you touched on.
But he has to be a bit professional.
Sure, yeah.
Do you think that Ben Chilwell needs a PR team like Raheem Sterling?
Ben Chilwell, in particular.
Get your tweets out, man. Get your statements before the game.
Yeah. There are some players who are truly stuck there. And it's a short career. Yeah, I know. We could all make the argument that sitting around not playing football and being paid very handsomely for it isn't that bad. But it's not the point. You want to play, right? Especially when you've been an England international like Chilwell has. There's a few players in that situation as well. Carney Chukwuemeka's another one who looked like he might get a move and didn't quite manage it. And it's
all that talent doing nothing.
But the thing is, the situation they've got, right, is that if you look at the practicality of it with someone like Chilwell, I know you guys are being flippant, but it's not really a comparable situation. Can he realistically put Chilwell in his squad, name him in his squad, and rely on him? He can't. He can't stay fit.
No, I think Jim and I are bemoaning the fact that he didn't make a move somewhere.
And he'd be on so much money that the Venn diagram of where he can go is quite small. One, because of his injury record, but two, because of his wages.
Yeah. Well, I fear that Ben Chilwell, because of injuries and so on, and I know obviously I'm just plucking a former England left back as well, but you don't want it to be a Wayne Bridge situation where he finally does go, and then it's just not.
You just never really find a home,
and that's the end of that, really. With Chilwell, I mean, obviously he's had his injuries. If he does not play at Chelsea, you think, okay, get your fitness together, all the rest of it, and then in January, for crying out loud, try.
I think the problem is, Marcus, is that that big
January seems a long way away at the moment.
It does. That big knee injury he had in November of 21. Every injury he's had since then, in terms of the information that's been released, has been related to that knee.
So maybe a rest will do him good then.
And so he can't seem to stay fit for long enough. He's not going to play at Chelsea, so it's a shame he hasn't got a move. But I mean, maybe he was offered moves and he didn't want them.
Possibly. Is Jadon Sancho going to play at Chelsea?
That's another amazing
because he's
story.
In there. On loan, of course, Chelsea have an obligation to buy him for 20 to 25 million next summer, which is remarkable considering when Man United signed him, he was, you would say, one of the hottest young properties in European football. They signed him for an enormous fee.
Probably the hottest.
Indeed, yeah. And now look at the situation.
Yeah, to be fair to Chelsea, if they can get that sort of tune out of him and release the player that we saw at Dortmund, to get a player like that for 20 odd million will be really good business. But like the wide options they have are fascinating, aren't they? They've obviously brought in Neto and Sancho in the summer. You've got McCollum, Mudryk there already. Noni Madueke, who's really progressing. One of the who's thriving in the chaos of Chelsea. People say that João Felix and Cole Palmer can play out there as well. I think I'm probably missing a few, and Kunku as well. excellent player.
But do you think the manager, Cole Palmer says to the manager on a Friday afternoon, boss, who am I going to be assisting on the weekend? You know, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? That Cole Palmer seems to be one of the few, and Jackson as well.
Yeah, 17 goals last season. Nicholas Jackson.
But they seem to be like the only ones who are guaranteed. You think like who to try? It's a guessing game, isn't it? Who's going to pop up?
Maybe it's a personality type. They just want everybody who thrives in chaos to come together.
Maybe it's just the element of surprise.
Exactly. It's
Opposition.
a heist.
How do you prepare? Well, you're going to be playing against
mask of an American president.
It is a crazy situation.
But the options there are incredible.
Oh, they are,
right?
But
but to keep them all happy.
But looking at it from Chelsea's point of view is fucking boring because we do that every single week, right?
I want it from your point of view.
From Sancho's point of view.
Oh, okay.
Is it out? So we're led to believe that he wants to go back to London, right?
Well, he said, I grew up in London and I'm happy to be back. So
and I don't think long term there was an option for him to go to Dortmund where he likes it there, but because of the money, right? Because of the wages, it's not realistic. So Chelsea was perhaps the only place he could go. I wonder if it's out of the frying pan into the fire. Now, Sancho's probably... We talk a lot, don't we? Not just about the stuff at Chelsea, but we talk a lot about the Man United situation. And no one has been more totemic and symbolic of the Man United chaos under Ten Hag and that whole regime, really. I know it's kind of changed slightly now, but it's still the same regime, really, when Ten Hag's there, than Sancho. I mean, Sancho's been such a lightning rod for all that stuff. And for him to get a move and get out there is great for him on paper. But I would just think to myself, if I was his agent, I'd be thinking, okay, you want to go back to London, the wages are difficult, not many teams are going to line up for you because they won't pay. Chelsea's the only option. Is that the best place for you? And if it's the only, if he just thought to himself, I've got to get out of United, whatever happens, I need to get out of here.
I think that's
going back to London's a priority. Then maybe Chelsea's where he can thrive. But the fact is, based on what the reporting's that we've seen, is that he's going to be a full-time, long-term Chelsea player now. He's going to sign for them permanently. I think the reason they did the loan is because it was just easier admin-wise to do it. So long-term, he's going to be at Chelsea. I'm asking, I'll put it back to you guys. Is that a better environment from the Man United?
Well,
we don't know, do we?
But, it's a different environment. And again, do you stick or twist? And I understand why he's twisting.
Yeah, the environment is an environment in which he'll play, though, right? And if it's the only option he's got, well, in theory, right? Because he'll understand going to the club that he'll need to win his place off of Madueke and the other players in front of him, right? But he's a professional, and the competitive people will accept that. I think the situation at Man United, as much as they spoke about how it had been smoothed over a little bit, was just he wasn't going to play, was he? He just wasn't Ten Hag's guy.
Also, you have to remember the conversations being had. He's essentially waiting for Ten Hag to move on from the club.
Absolutely.
And that may or may not happen. We don't know.
That'll happen. I think that'll happen by Christmas.
We suspect it will.
Yeah.
But does he want to do that? He's given a chance to go to Chelsea. I'm sure that the representatives at Chelsea would have spoken about what Maresca is doing. So there's all sorts of stuff that go on there. The crucial thing for anybody, I would say, going to Chelsea at the moment, especially Sancho, is, for crying out loud, when they do offer you a full-time contract, get a 1 or 2 year deal. For blue nails. I mean, we just heard that Nicholas Jackson has signed a new 9-year contract. Well, I don't know what they're doing there, but the fact is, with regards to wages, with regards to people paying big money, if you're a player like Sancho, most clubs
He's not going to go there for such a short-term deal, though.
No, I know, but I'm sort of saying it slightly sort of tongue-in-cheek, but also slightly seriously, although they wouldn't do that, because as a footballer, you do want to get into a contract, and the club want you to, so they can sell you for a fee. But you just will be trapped there. It'll just be loan deals and all the rest of it.
So I think what he's got working in his favour, it's worth mentioning this in the context of this move, is that he's very versatile, Sancho. If you look at where he's played his football, the majority has been on the left or the right, but it's roughly quite even as to how much he's played in both.
Yeah.
So he can play, he can do both. And I think that's probably a massive part of the attraction for someone like Maresca to say, right, he's someone who can do it at the highest level on both flanks. The issue is, I suppose, what player they're getting, because Sancho's best season was the 19-20 season at Dortmund, where he contributed like 17 goals, 17 assists. He was unstoppable. He was also very young. He's now had, 2 or 3 years where he's, probably 2, I suppose, maybe 3, where he's not really shown what he's capable of consistently. And that's a long time.
Yeah, but he did play in the Champions League final last season.
He did.
So
on loan.
Right.
Well, I'm just saying.
No, my point is, though, that to add to what we're saying, is when you look at Chelsea's wide options, I mean, he's achieved more in the game already than, say, Mudryk or
Sure.
Madueke and all these players. And he will have self-belief.
But that's not my point. My point,
No, sure.
My point is just more specifically is what player are they getting? And I don't know if we know that now.
Yeah, but he himself knows what he's capable of, and we've seen what he's capable of. And as I say, playing in a Champions League final last year, it was a bit of a surprise. He still did it, and he had a much better season with Dortmund than he would have done with Manchester United. And he's thinking to himself, right, I'm feeling ready. And also, he bloody backs himself. So I think it is a good move just because it's not there. I mean, move to bloody Saudi might have been a good move for him. Do you know what I mean? I just think get out of there.
I think it's the second. I think United, based on what's happened, is the worst place for him.
And Chelsea's the second worst.
Yeah.
So it's still a better choice.
Yeah. And I don't think Saudi's realistic, but I think Saudi would be as bad.
Oh yeah, look, do you want a kick in the bollocks or a punch in the stomach? You know what I mean? Like, I understand.
We're looking at situations now where a lot of top players, and we're going to talk about one in the second half here. It's just the admin and the logistics and the money involved now makes it quite hard for big players to move sometimes.
Yeah. But just to summarise with Sancho, we know what's going to happen at Manchester United. Even if he was to play, it just wouldn't happen. It's not happening there. There is a chance that he can do something at Chelsea, however slim or big. There's a chance. So there we are. All right, coming up in the second half, we've got Ivan Toney heading off to Saudi. Napoli have now got a Scottish midfield, and Neil Maupay escapes Everton. See you in a moment.
Only Antonio Portala is in front of him, but the Mexican is an absolute wall there. Donald Trump would be proud of that.
Welcome back to the Football Ramble, everybody. Commentary from Dundee TV there.
It's great stuff.
Indeed. Right, Ivan Toney. He was seen in the stands watching Brentford beat Southampton on the weekend, but it was a farewell because he has signed for Saudi Pro League club Al Ahly for a fee in the region of £40 million. He's going to be rich.
He's going to be very, very rich, isn't he? I do wonder. I wonder how much he actually wanted this move, and whether it was at the point that Brentford were just like, look, we need to get a fee for you, and possibly put pressure on him to make the move. I mean, I'm only speculating on that because you would expect that Tony would have wanted to stay in the Premier League. Everything looked aligned for that, and it's not happened. And I think it's a shame to lose him out of the league, especially at the age he's at. He's probably got a couple of really good years left in him. And it's Saudi's gain once again.
Well, it is, yeah. I mean,
330 grand a week at Saudi, apparently.
Bloody Nora.
Yeah.
I mean, it's eye-watering, isn't it? I think with Tony, he wanted to move to a bigger club in the Premier League. But if nobody comes in for him, then what do you do? And it's a situation with the Saudi Pro League where they say, well, okay, it's not the move you're going to make, but you and your children and your children's children are going to be set up for life here. And Tony himself has that slightly different perspective than some Premier League players in that he went through the lower leagues. Yeah,
and also I had no idea he's already a great granddad. That probably will change your perspective on things when you need to sort of get that generational wealth in there.
Incredible.
Yeah.
But perhaps that perspective is there. He thinks it is a short career. He's not made the kind of money that maybe one or two other big players have in the Premier League. And like for the vast majority of people on the planet, like I know we've talked about Saudi and the regime and how they do things and so on. That is an extraordinary amount of money.
It is, and I think it's a case of price of everything, value of nothing. And I think the story of this move and the story of his last year or so is that it's been, for whatever reason, I don't actually know the reason specifically, but it's been badly mismanaged.
It has. Yeah.
I mean, he had a chance to move before, it didn't happen, and the reality is now he was getting towards the end of the summer, already saying he's not going to sign again for Brentford.
Yeah.
Maybe Brentford didn't want to sign him on again. I don't know.
But but Thomas Frank suggested that look, if he wanted to stay, and so they would have been up for it.
Yeah.
So I think he could have stayed in the Premier League.
And then there was nowhere for him to go.
Well, that's right.
And so because the Arsenal thing, there's a report that he had a meeting with Arteta and Edu. It went really badly. They weren't convinced by him. I don't know what the reason for that was, but that's what's been reported. Spurs would have been a nice fit, but they went for Solanke, paid more for Solanke. And that meant that was dead in the water. Chelsea had a little sniff. That didn't manifest itself. Ultimately, then after that, I mean, he was never going to go to Liverpool. He's never going to go to Man City. So after that, given that Villa have got Watkins, given that Newcastle
Isak.
have Isak and whoever. So
you start looking at clubs around Brentford's stature.
Exactly.
Right?
So he had nowhere to go. So basically, for whatever reason, he's completely mistimed it, and he's ended up going somewhere he didn't want to go. I think that the fact that he attended the game against Southampton and looked quite upset tells you everything you need to know. There was absolutely no reason to go there, apart from to do the old kind of farewell goodbye type thing. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he thinks to himself, and maybe his agents kind of advised him on this, perhaps go to Saudi, go for a year, hoover up as much money as you can.
Well, if you can, I mean, there was always
and the game may have changed by then. Premier League will be completely different this time next year, because it always is. Managers would have moved on, clubs would have moved on, players would have moved on. Where can you go then? I wouldn't be surprised if we see him back in a year.
Yeah, I wouldn't be as well.
Having said that, if he does come back too quick, he could be liable for a certain amount of UK tax, which may put a dent in those coffers.
Wedge.
But I think the coffers will probably survive it.
Yeah, people say this a lot, don't they, about the Saudi move? Like, you got to be careful, because you might end up paying tax. I'm like, yeah, but just pay your fucking tax.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, according to some in the press, that he will be getting, including bonuses, £403,000 per week, which is the equivalent of 800 grand per week in the UK before tax.
Because the tax is 40,
and at the moment, he's reportedly earning 36 grand a week at Brentford.
Yeah.
I understand to the average citizen, they wouldn't bloody mind a bit of that, but let's keep it in the context in which it is. So it's an astonishing increase in pay. But I think what Luke said, go to Saudi, even if it's for a year, and even if you have to pay a fair bit of tax on that money, you're still, very much in the black, and then come back. But I think it's a shame because, from me, again, I look at it purely from a fan, from a footballing point of view. He's playing the Euros final for England. Now, I understand he's always going to be, while Harry Kane's around, he's always just going to be a bit player for England.
But he's not going to play for England now.
No, he won't.
Yeah.
And so basically, he's set fire to all this sort of stuff. And but from his point of view, I understand, blah, 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 blah. But there's no doubt about it. I think any football fan will look at this and just go, because he's a quality player and we know what he can do. But he will have a very, very healthy bank account.
He's going to be out of sight and out of mind for at least a year now.
You would think.
Yeah.
And he's been one of the Premier League's best strikers. And so, to me, that's a shame.
But he was backed into a corner, and I suppose...
But he backed himself into a corner.
Well, he backed himself into a corner, indeed. And it was either, OK, you now just get rid of it all and stay at Brentford. But the problem with that is I think that's almost a bit disrespectful to Brentford and the rest of the squad, because Thomas Frank knows that Toney was on his way, and Brentford were hoping for a big fee. And if he plays these games, it's kind of like, well, we've planned our whole team and our whole thing without you. Now, I think if there would have been a proper apology and he'd have probably come down from it, then maybe they could have patched it up.
No one would have cared. He scored a couple of goals on his comeback.
Fine, but then he gets this ludicrous money from Saudi Arabia, and he's thought to himself, OK.
What's happened is he's the fact that he featured for England in the Euros, he was fortunate to do so, in my view. He made a contribution nonetheless. That's been really the footballing high point of the last couple of years for him, because the decisions he made, which resulted in him having a ban, were ridiculous. He then didn't really contribute when he came back. His stock was partly rescued by the summer because he featured for England, but before that, his stock was where it was. And as soon as the Chelsea interest kind of dried up and they couldn't get the deal done, or they didn't want him enough or whatever, he was done, and he had already burnt the bridge. So he's got to go to Saudi now. So that's happening. What's happened? But the thing is, he's in his late 20s, so he needs to work out what his priorities are. Clearly, he's decided what they are. But now he's going to be out of mind, as I say, and that's going to be that. Yeah,
and Chelsea, who were linked with a move for him, didn't get Victor Osimhen as well on deadline day. And it was funny because Chelsea and Al Ahly were in a funny old situation where there was Chelsea were interested in both strikers, particularly Osimhen, and Al Ahly had a deal with Osimhen as well, but it's not. Yeah, then Al Ahly were putting out that they couldn't afford to buy both of them. Yeah. Then they got Toney, and the Osimhen thing fell through anyway. But I think the part of the reason, I don't know what the context or the details of the potential deal for Victor Osimhen to go to Chelsea were, but it's weirdly indicative, because Victor Osimhen didn't follow up his season before last season with anything like the quality that he had in the following year, and as a result, he's it feels a bit like he's missed the boat as well. And I think if he had followed up the season he had the season before last with another one at Napoli, obviously they came 10th, he didn't really do as much.
he would have been shooing for the Premier League. But I love that Gilmour and McTominay, two Scottish midfielders, have gone there. It's great.
It's super.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And it's really good for them because you would think they would settle a bit quicker than they have.
You can see all the fans having the old Tam O'Shanter hats on.
And you know that lots of Scots are going to go out there and watch it as well, which is really, really great. I mean, I'm really pleased with Scott McTominay because he's been, a faithful servant to Manchester United over the years. And we know McTominay's a good player, but if you really want to kick on and play regular Champions League football and the sort of the top end, then maybe he's not a starter really. In fact, he wasn't a starter that much at all. His last game for Manchester United is an FA Cup victory over Manchester City, and I think a player like him, what he's done at that club, I think he deserves that. And now he's got a really glamorous move.
Yeah, what a brilliant. What a brilliant thing to do with your life, to go and play in Naples like that, in that incredible atmosphere and experience a new culture, a new footballing culture, and a new...
And a very rich one at that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And he scored 10 goals for Man United last season. We talked on the show yesterday about Mo Salah having scored more goals at Old Trafford than only very few Man United players. McTominay was one of those players who has scored more goals at Old Trafford than Mo Salah has. So that's something.
He leaves with his head held high. Do you think though, part of the deal, he went, can my wee mate come as well? Even though McTominay doesn't have a Scottish accent.
Yeah.
But
Can Billy chum me?
Yeah. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Billy Gilmour's the kind of player that it's obviously getting ahead of ourselves, but if he stayed there and he enjoyed it, the type of player he is, they'd love him.
New Maradona.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
that. Let's put a bit of pressure on that. No, it's lovely stuff. Let's go back to old England. Another midfielder was on the move. James Ward-Prowse joined Nottingham Forest on loan. Funny one, considering the start of the season he had with West Ham. Got a lot of assists and swinging in those corners. They seem to love him there, and some people, not just West Ham fans, were a little bit annoyed that he didn't get back in the England squad. I understand why that wasn't the case, but there was definitely talk about that. And now he's off.
Yeah,
on loan at least.
Lopetegui probably just doesn't fancy him, right? That seems to be the most likely explanation. He just doesn't fit into the way he wants to play.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly, and West Ham do have a bit of quality and whatnot. But look, you've always been a little bit coy on Ward-Prowse. Obviously, his set piece, which free kicks are absolutely superb. You can put in a corner and so on. And some have maybe overrated him, perhaps because of that.
Well, I don't think he gets around the pitch that well. I don't think he contributes a huge amount in that outside of his set piece delivery, of course. And the way that West Ham play under Lopetegui, they play one or two sitters. I don't think he's robust enough to play in that role. And Lopetegui's not really picked him. I think he picked him for part of a League Cup game, really, that's it. Mm-hmm. So maybe he felt like the writing was on the wall and he needed to move. It's a shame because he's not been long out of Southampton, really. And I wondered if he'd ever leave there because there's a bit of a kind of... bit of a tradition for those types of players to stay and be a big fish in a small pond, I suppose. West Ham are, a bigger club, and obviously up in London, hasn't worked out for him. I think he's not in Forest a good move for him. It's tough to say, really. He just basically just needs to play, and I think he needs to convince people, myself included, of what he's offering outside of this really obviously great dead ball stuff. Mm-hmm. When I say he doesn't get around the pitch as much, I don't mean that he's not got the engine or that he doesn't cover ground. I just mean that sometimes if you look at the way that a lot of teams play with one or two sitting players, I mean, for example, you look at Aston Villa, who beat West Ham at West Ham. Mm-hmm. They play with Tielemans and Onana in front of the back four. Mm-hmm. You kind of know instinctively what type of players they are. Yeah. Right. You know what they're bringing. Yeah. You know why they're there. I'm not saying I'm right and you guys are wrong. You guys can enlighten me all you like. I don't really know what Ward-Prowse is bringing. He's not that dynamic. He's not strong. He's not tough. I don't really know what he's doing. So I think a move is probably right for him, given the writing was on the wall with him under Lopetegui. Will he feature for Nottingham Forest? I guess it depends on how much you rate the players that Nottingham Forest have already got in there. They're going to face a battle this season. They played against Bournemouth with Danilo and Sangaré in there. Can he usurp one of them? Unless you think he plays better in a different position.
Well, Danilo's had a bad injury, hasn't he? And also with Awoniyi and Chris Wood to aim at. The dead ball kind of specialism.
But you can't just do that.
I know. Well,
but it is
you
handy,
say that,
though.
but I do think that's probably why he's got that move.
But I think there's. Look, I take your points on Ward-Prowse, and I think Jim also makes a decent point there that if you have something which can be match winning or game changing.
Let me just put it this way then. So I think possibly because he's getting. He'll be 30 this year, right? So he's not like a young player or anything. Maybe his best position is like a number 10.
Yeah, but he's not going to play that with Gibbs White.
Exactly. Gibbs White plays there.
But I think we think more of a player sitting behind someone like Gibbs White. I think it is a decent bit of business from Forest, and I think that Ward-Prowse will play. And, if he scores a couple of free kicks this year, and that ends up giving them a win or saves a game or something.
Yeah. He didn't get one for West Ham, so he'll want to put that right.
He certainly will, Jimmy.
I think it's a shame for him because it's all about timing in football, isn't it? They get a new manager in West Ham. He played a lot last season. He contributed a fair amount, to be fair to him. And it seems to be. I mean, we could read in between the lines, but it must just be the case that Lopetegui said you can go, and that happens to players. Yeah. It's only the very, very top players that doesn't happen to. So there's no shame in it. If he can recapture that and force his way into the side at Forest, and then maybe he can make a contribution as well.
Yeah. There were some big moves overseas as well. We've talked about the two Scotsmen going to Napoli, of course. Wilfried Zaha, remember him? He's moved to Andy Brassell's Lyon, as they're called in that part of the world, on loan. It's not quite worked out at Galatasaray as he would have hoped. He's become a bit of a bit part player, and Andy said, he's not really convinced. It was a bit of a shame. I mean, there had been talk of a return to Crystal Palace, which would be quite something.
Is that just because it's a really easy link to make, though?
Probably. I think because if they could get him at a decent deal, they'd probably have him back, especially with Elise going.
That's because he came back for a bit and he was kipping on Roy's sofa,
right?
And everyone was like, the lads are coming back, getting the band back.
What kind
together.
of sofa do you think Roy would have?
Like a old-fashioned, stuffed one.
Yeah.
With
pattern on it.
Yeah, pattern
flowers.
On it. Yeah.
Flowers. I was thinking that as well.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought leather.
He's got the recliner.
Yes.
He's got the recliner bit as well.
Yeah, and it doesn't suit anything else in the room.
No, it goes. It's in the chair.
Oh, I see what you mean. But
there
there is a chair in the room that does not fit with the rest of the decor.
That's Roy's reading chair.
Yeah. But I think that's a different room. So I think he would have wing backs in the library.
Yeah, probably. Tea tray. Do you ever dinner on a tray?
Yeah, definitely. Silver.
Yeah. Big time.
Depending on where he is in the house.
Surely he'd have his dinner out of a feeder.
Yeah. No, he doesn't want to be fed. He wants to hunt.
I was going to say he has it wherever the mice are.
It's like
whatever comes into the garden
outside.
That's my dinner.
That's where he has his dinner.
It's like when Will Hughes told that story about having to have dinner at Neil Warnock's house.
Oh my goodness!
That his wife had made him. He's just sitting there on the tray in front of the telly eating his dinner,
watching the Raw Family.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, yeah. So Zaha's on the move to Lyon on loan at least. Tammy Abraham has moved on loan from Roma to AC Milan.
He's having a lovely time, isn't he?
I love that.
There's something good about that.
I sort of hope that Abraham can get himself back into the England picture.
I know what you mean. Is that profile strike? Again, he's.
I think Ivan Toney might have helped.
Indeed, but yeah, there is something about Sammy Abraham when he went to Roma and got a new lease of life, really, and they were kind of playing to his strengths. And you think, there's. Yeah, because England have had one or two strikers who were kind of in a bit like Dominic Calvert-Lewin, for example, and Tammy Abraham's similar type of profile of striker.
Yeah, definitely.
And you think Watkins is the number 2 now behind Kane. So, if indeed Lee Carsley was to fancy bringing a third striker along, it is up for grabs.
But Abraham hasn't scored goal. I mean, he had that one amazing season.
Well,
he hasn't scored goals. It's been diminishing returns. Some would argue he's been Mourinho'd. But so he needs a move. He needs to freshen it up. But I love the fact that he's really leaning into his Italian sojourn, that he's loving it there.
Yeah.
And he's like, right, I need a move. I need to freshen things up. I'm staying in Italy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to another massive club. That's great.
Thanks for watching a clip from the Football Ramble podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're feeling extra generous, why don't you like this video? Why don't you like this video?